Hello, and welcome to this episode of Counsel Trends. I am Dr. Shanae Anderson with my beautiful colleague, Dr. Mercy Connors. And we are doing an article today that I think reflects both of our states of mind.
Yes.
Lately in particular.
Yes.
We are doing an article on brain fog. So for anybody who is currently struggling with or has struggled with brain fog, you're not alone. We found this article. It's actually an unpublished paper, but we really liked it so much and we felt that it was so relevant that we opted to actually use it for Counsel Trends, this section. So it is entitled Brain Fog, Exploring Associations with Stress, Connectedness to Nature, and Mindfulness. And there are two authors, Sneha Jindal and Susan Bodner from the Teachers College at Columbia University. And so the beginning of the article, they really talked a lot about how brain fog is kind of not necessarily a new thing, but it's been around for a while, but it seems to have gotten a lot more attention since COVID.
Yes. And I think that was very good that they did bring this up. Like when we looked at actual articles on brain fog, almost everything was connected to COVID-19. And we're like, well, we want to do something a little bit more general because we know that it's not always connected to that virus. But they did obviously have to touch on that in the article as well because it is so highly connected.
Exactly. So just opening up, in their study, the way that they talk about brain fog, their definition is that it is a form of cognitive impairment characterized by problems with attention, concentration, memory, comprehending spoken and written language, confusion, mental fatigue, and reduced mental clarity. Or it can also be described as the experience of fogginess, decreased sharpness, and feeling scattered.
Yes. This is a non-clinical sample. So that means that we're not talking a lot about people who have mental health diagnoses or physical diagnoses either. So this is really general people that struggle with what you were just talking about, which actually in the middle of that definition, I was like, here goes the brain fog.
Well, and what they did is they actually used a brain fog scale, which I thought was really cool that they had developed that because I didn't know that that was a thing.
Yes.
And so for anybody who is interested in the brain fog scale, if you want to assess your level of brain fog, because dear Mercy and I both assessed our level of brain fog, you can actually find the brain fog scale in another article that is called Brain Fog Scale, Scale Development and Validation. And it's from the journal Personality and Individual Differences in 2024. The author, the lead author is Dabowska. And within here, they go through 23 items to assess brain fog, which we'll go over that in a moment. But one of the things that I wanted to point out about this scale is that they think that there are three dimensions that create brain fog, and those include mental fatigue or the reported feeling of mental exhaustion, which, oh my gosh, do I have that? Impaired cognitive acuity, or the reported difficulties related to thinking and comprehending clearly, concentrating, memory, as well as learning.
Yes.
And confusion, or the reported experience of disorientation or difficulties relating to meaningfully engaging with one's surroundings.
That's a lot.
That is a lot.
Like when we think about like symptoms, usually in depression or something like that, we're looking for a good 5. Like that was like 20.
Well, I think the way in which they describe it, yes, but it definitely, I think, the three components, the mental fatigue, which I think is pretty straightforward, of just feeling like you're just not on your game.
Right, feeling sluggish, trying to get your brain moving. Yes.
Yeah, and then impaired cognitive acuity. You're just kind of not really with it. As you normally would cognitively. And then confusion, I think, is a pretty straightforward concept.
So I feel like those things are really easy. But when you talk about like all of that underneath of it, like like, that's just, I mean, that feels heavy.
Well, that is actually creating mental fatigue in me as we review it.
About this.
But what they were really looking for in this study is, did perceived stress influence levels of brain fog?
Right. And that was very interesting to me because I think that there is a difference between perceived stress and actual stress.
Exactly.
And, it's interesting because the way that we think about our stress is going to change the way that we feel our stress.
Absolutely. That's an excellent point, because if you think about it, a lot of times stress can be very intense and very heavy, like getting married or something like that may be positive.
Right.
But it is still very stressful.
Right. And you feel that a lot.
Right.
But I think there is that difference of an emotion attached to it. Like you were talking about getting married. Like there's a lot of excitement and a lot of anticipation and those types of things, which I feel like makes the body be able to get through it. But then what about those negative emotions, right, of I'm thinking drudgery is what comes to mind, right? And that just makes it hard to get through.
Drudgery and what did we say? Mental fatigue?
Yes.
That's kind of how I've been feeling lately.
Yes.
Anyways, the study also looked at how mindfulness and nature and environment may actually moderate the impact of stress on brain fog.
Right, which I feel like is actually very interesting because, oftentimes when we talk about mental health, we're thinking, oh, that means that you're going to need to have like a certain type of treatment or techniques or something like that. But what they were really talking about is something simple.
Right.
Simple things to really moderate brain fog and perceived stress, which I was really excited about.
I liked that too. So the first research question was really, is perceived stress a predictor of brain fog? So what they found is yes. The higher your levels of perceived stress, increase your risk of brain fog.
Right.
And so Mercy and I decided that we wanted to take this test ourselves to see if our perceived level of stress actually could be what is connected to our potential brain fog. See, I've got brain fog that I can't even remember that it's called brain fog.
Yeah, and this was very interesting. So it's a 10 question scale, which in the
For the perceived stress scale.
Yes, perceived stress scale is a 10 question scale. They talked about 14 questions, but we couldn't find that version. Every version, and this is the one that seems to be used the most, is the 10 question one. And it's very interesting if you answer all the questions. There are some that are in reverse, so make sure
scoring.
The reverse scoring that you do that correctly, because I didn't do that first.
But it's scored on a Likert scale between 0 for never and 4 for very often. And it really asks some questions about how you are experiencing stress and what are your feelings about it. Do you want to read some of the examples?
So the one that I kind of had the most trouble with was this one question. It was number 6. In the last month, how often have you found that you could not cope with all the things that you had to do? And I was like, there's not a choice in that. Like, you just have to cope. Like,
Right.
You don't get to just fall apart in the middle of a day. You've gotta, just take it and handle it.
Well, and that's where a lot of these questions, so for example, in the last month, how often have you been upset because of something that happened unexpectedly, or you were unable to control the important things in your life, or you felt stressed, or you couldn't control irritants in your life, and feeling like you're on top of things, or getting angry because things kind of aren't going your way.
Right. So I think it's very interesting that it's called perceived stress, because I feel like it should have been just stress. Like, this is the stress I am under.
I know, but that's where I think, why don't you share what your score was, and then I'll share what mine was.
My score was 27.
Mine was 31. And so scores ranging between 0 to 13, you are considered to have low stress. 14 to 26 are moderate stress. And 27 to 40 is high perceived stress.
So we're really stressed.
But Mercy, reality. It's just your perception of the stress.
Right.
So I'm going to discount and say it's not the actual stress. It's just how you're perceiving it.
I know. And again, this after we took this, both of us were kind of mad because we're like, it's not perceived. It's real.
It's real stress. Yes, between your parenting.
Yep.
3 littles.
Yes.
I'm dealing with a very aging father, and my son and his family with my granddaughter have just moved into our home.
Yes.
And I'm dealing with kind of generational issues on both sides of the spectrum and working full time and
stress. That doesn't sound perceived. That sounds like
it's
actual.
real. So maybe we need to create an actual stress scale as opposed to perceived.
We have real stress.
Yes. And I think our anger and frustration over the word perceived is because our stress level is over the top.
Yes. I think if we would have said low, we would have been like, oh, yay. It's not that bad. But
that would have never happened for us.
No, not where we are in life.
So we both have very high levels of stress.
Yes.
And so we also then took the brain fog scale.
Yes.
And I want to read some sample items from that scale as well. So it's that it's also scored on a Likert scale, so kind of 0 to 5 or 4, I forget.
Yes.
My thinking has been slow. I have felt mentally exhausted. I've felt fatigued. I felt sleepy. It's difficult to remember and understand new information.
Yeah, my favorite was number 8. I have found myself forgetting certain words, such as the names of objects. That happens to me like all the time.
That happens to me all the time. And initially I'm like, okay, stress, I think it's menopausal stuff. But then I've been wondering, am I like developing like Alzheimer's or something? Because I can't remember names of things.
No, literally, I'm in a conversation with my husband and I'll be like,
the thing. The thing that does the thing.
I have to point at it and be like this. He will tell me the name of it. I'll be like, yes, that.
I got in a fight with my husband the other day because I couldn't remember the name, and I can't remember what it is now, for the thing that you use to take like the last dregs of your skin, like skin cream out of. But I don't even know what you call that.
I don't even know what that is.
And he's like, what is this? And I'm like, I don't even have the time to try to even begin to explain what it is.
It's the thing.
Because I don't even know what the name of the thing is anyways. But that's one of the items. Some of the other items that it's difficult to concentrate, think clearly, find the right words, organize thoughts.
Ooh, my other favorite was I have had a hard time understanding what others say. Okay, I have a 3-year-old. That question's not fair.
That is really funny. I hadn't thought about that.
I literally am like, okay, tell me that again. Like, finally, I just get my 5-year-old or my 6-year-old, like, tell me what she's
please.
saying.
Oh my gosh. Well, and some of these where I thought were very interesting. I have felt confused. I have felt lost.
Yes.
I have felt absent, as if I were living in my own world. Yes. Some of these sound like dissociative experiences to me.
Yes. And but I wonder if too, like how I kind of like conceptualize brain fog is like I'm wading through. Yes. Like it is like fog.
Like
and I'm like,
Jell-O
I am literally trying to like
it's like what?
move stuff out of the way so that I can like figure it out. And so like some of that feels like that. Like I literally am wading through my mind and I'm like, okay, that's not the thought I need right now. Wait, that's not it either. Like
it's like see, you're too young to remember when we would have to go into the stacks of library and doing the Dewey Decimal System.
Oh no, I totally remember that.
To find things in the library is next to impossible. Yes. That is like what my brain feels like.
Yes, and like you pull out the book and you're like, no, I must have written this.
Right, exactly. I think, what does that number say? Anyways, back to the scale. Mercy and I both took the test.
Yes.
And I think there was, do you remember what the max possible on the scale, I think was like, was it 72?
Yeah,
no.
It was pretty high, if I remember correctly.
Was it pretty high?
But we were both in the high range.
We were.
Again, I was 44.
I was 39, which shocked me because I would have anticipated that I was higher. But what was interesting is in the article where they talk about the brain fog test, they actually said that See, and I just lost what I was going to say.
Oh, it was the 17 standard deviation. Like
That's what it was.
So it was like
the mean.
The mean was like 34, and then like 17 was
is.
the first standard deviation. And we're both thinking, that's really big. Like that's a
That is, because that's where it's like, okay, so I would think both of our levels of brain fog are pretty significant.
Yeah.
I scored 39. What were you?
44.
44. And the median was 33, and the mean was 34, but with a standard deviation of 17. So what that means is to be in the normal range, your score can be 17 points above 34 or 17 points below. So what I'm understanding is that our level of brain fog is normal?
I have a question of, I think this scale shows that everybody has brain fog.
Which is so concerning, right? Well, and that's where we're looking at, I'm sorry, we are all over the place today. I think it is our perceived stress and brain fog.
Yes.
But what I think is so fascinating is that the original study definitely showed when you have high perceived, I'm going to also say high actual stress.
Yes, both.
It
probably.
definitely can cause the brain fog. But I just want to say, I don't think that's what is causing my brain fog.
Oh, what do you think it is?
Because you've known me now for quite a while, and my stress level has always been pretty consistent for quite a long time.
Right.
I mean, I think since my childhood, I operate at a very high level, but I multitask really well.
Yeah.
I truly believe, and the study said they did not find this, my brain fog has entered into my life post-COVID.
And see, I think that's a little bit different for me because I don't.
Well, yours is post-childbirth.
Yes. That
makes
is true.
sense.
That is true. But I think it's interesting because, like, I don't ever know if I ever had COVID-19. Like, you know, just at that point in time, I was like, I'm not going anywhere, so I'm not going to test. Like, there's no need. Like, I'm only around my.
I lost my sense of smell and taste.
Yes.
It's the only reason I knew it. And I've had it several times.
Well, but the funny thing is I had a sickness, post-COVID, so post-2020, post-2021, I think, and I lost my sense of taste as well. But when I tested, it was something else. It was strep or something, something interesting. I was like, that's not what I thought I had. But, you know, again, this is where I feel like symptoms, you know, and what people experience were different with COVID-19. I also think that people experience different long-term symptoms from COVID-19.
And I did have long COVID. And so I do think that is the first time I ever felt brain fog. Because I know I had patients that would talk about brain fog. And I always kind of thought, well, that sounds a little bit like a symptom of depression.
Yes.
Because you have issues around concentration and focus. But I'm telling you, I really have the brain fog ever since I have COVID. And I'll notice every time I'll have COVID, I'll have the brain fog for several months after. And you and I have talked about a few things that we use to help us with that.
Like different vitamins and things like that have been very helpful, you know. But I also think it's very interesting, too, because I've noticed that specifically the whole, like, not being able to come up with words. Like, that was really difficult, like, during pregnancy, right after pregnancy. Then it seemed to get a little bit better, and then I'm going back into it again. So I'm also wondering, like, if, you know, and I never had that problem before pregnancy ever.
But there is the pregnancy brain.
No, that's true.
That we know about. And just like we are now recognizing menopausal women, we have lots of brain fog. So we can attribute it to, I think, hormones on both those cases.
Yes.
As well as stress.
But I think that's weird that I came out of it and I'm going back into it. Oh, please tell me I'm not menopausal.
No, you're not. Trust me, you're way too young. Anyways, back to our study. Not only did they find perceived stress as a predictor of brain fog, they found some interesting moderating factors.
Yes, and I thought this was really great because I loved that they actually did this. So one of the things that they found was that where perceived stress explained approximately 35% of the variance in brain fog scores, perceived stress emerged as a significant predictor of brain fog. So I feel like that was really, really helpful to know that. But then it goes into the moderation. And this is where it takes in the connectedness to nature and the mindfulness stuff. Now, this one's really interesting. So what it said is that, and I'm going to read it so I don't say this incorrectly. The findings suggest that connectedness to nature significantly and negatively moderates the relationship between perceived stress and brain fog, implying that the effect of perceived stress on brain fog reduces as connectedness to nature increases. So what we know is that perceived stress increases your brain fog.
Yes.
But if you have connectedness to nature, it then severs or moderates or
It'll decrease
affects.
the impact of the stress. So what do you think that's about? What do you think is it about nature and being connected to nature that will moderate the impact of stress?
Well, we know that when we're out in nature, it automatically regulates your autonomic nervous system.
Right.
Like that's one of the things that we know from research. Also, it allows you to do deep breathing and be more mindful, which is the next connection here. But I think it also, it's where we're supposed to be.
Right.
You know, that's what God created. God created us for a garden, you know, so it would make sense that we have this perceived stress in a lot of rooms, you know, either office or home, or these are artificial created things.
Right.
But when we go to where God actually created us to live, which is in nature with grass, with trees, you know, I'm thinking oxygen levels. I'm thinking hearing the birds singing, especially. You know.
And just also the beauty, because I'm thinking for me, I try to, in between every patient that I have during the day, to step outside. I'm barefoot. I ground myself. I look around at God's beauty. I take those deep breaths. And I do think to a certain degree it helps. And so I'm going to keep trying to do more of that and see if it helps clear up
But I
the
also
brain
think
fog.
too, you know, as you were talking about that, it also reminds me that there are bigger things than what we're stressed about.
Right?
You know, if I can't understand my 3-year-old, like, you know,
Just go outside and play with her in
I
nature.
know, and then it doesn't matter what she said.
It's just, yes.
Exactly. But I do think that helps us to remember that there are bigger things. There are things that transcend this stress that we're feeling.
Well, and that we should, and that I think God created us that way.
Yes. Yeah.
Which secondarily, another hypothesis that they found was that they wanted to look at the degree of mindfulness to see if you had greater mindfulness, did that decrease your brain fog? And generally, overall, as a construct, it did not. But they looked specifically at higher levels of acting with awareness actually moderated the brain fog. So it's really, the more you are actively engaging in what you have to do with a level of self-awareness, which kind of makes sense, then you'll decrease your brain fog.
It kind of like made me think of like, you know, sometimes, you know, I get distracted by my phone, like, you know, is my husband going to text me, you know, is work texting me, you know, those types of things. But if I have to get something done, I'm going to put that phone down and not and focus in, and that's an active thing. And I'm like, I'm not going to pick that back up until I am done with this task. And that makes sense because then it makes me zone in. It makes me concentrate, which that doesn't mean that temptation's not there. It's just I'm actively not pursuing.
Well, and you're I think through the through the focusing and the active level of awareness, it is almost like this bright laser focus through the fog.
Yes.
I mean, we were joking before we went on air that because of my brain fog, I couldn't even get through the article. And I kept trying to like focus and have this level of awareness to be able to really understand what the article was saying.
Right. But I do think that it's very interesting. When they were talking about this in the discussion piece, I really appreciated that they said that this is not looking at chronic stress. And I do feel like that's almost what we're talking about is chronic stress. This is really talking about in that moment in time.
Right.
And so that's something too to be aware of, that this is a very like static.
Like a snapshot in time. And actually both you and I are outside the age range of the study, because I think that they were looking at individuals that were under 30.
Right.
But I do think it is definitely applicable. I think there definitely is a link between stress, whether it's chronic stress or acute stress. And one's ability to think clearly.
Yes.
One of the things they talk about in here that I thought was so interesting is linking some of this brain fog to like a dissociative state. And this is where I do also see some of my patients that as they have greater stress, they do tend to become a little bit more dissociative as well, because it's almost like, it's just too much, let me go away. And I feel like that's almost an active attempt to avoid it. And that's why when I keep thinking of, oh my gosh, the more I actually have to be more mindful of my stress, I think that's actually creating more stress for me. If I have to be aware of it. Anyways, we hope that this study has been helpful for you. We encourage you to take some of the tests that we did to look at your level of perceived or actual stress, in addition your level of brain fog, to see if you're anywhere within the same range that we are.
And please give us a like if you enjoyed this, even though it was kind of brain foggy as we were talking. But also let us know what you think. If you took the test, tell us how you're experiencing this. If you liked this type of study where we kind of did it too. Also, of course, please become a member of the AACC if you want to hear more about this stuff. We do Counsel Trends every week, and some of our members get to see those special ones, so we would love to have you be a part of those as well. And as always, we love being a part of your life.